No, we're not talking about the 15th re-release of The Last of Us Part 2. Today we're talking about Days Gone. If your initial reaction was, Days Gone? Days Gone? Oh, that game! Then you know what I'm talking about. If not, then leave. You're not welcome here. Ah, fuck. Look, I don't think Days Gone is a horrible game. I just think saying that it's the best game of all time is a very huge overstatement. Don't get me wrong, the concept is pretty good. The idea and game mechanics make the game stand out enough to be unique compared to other games in its genre, but playing it through the second time years later, the game feels dull and incomplete. Especially at the end, where the game stopped making sense whatsoever and started to show its true colors. Before taking Days Gone apart, let's talk about its origin. The idea for Days Gone was born in 2013 as a pitch to Sony by their third-party developer team Bend Studio. This would be their first open-world game, as well as Bend Studio's first intellectual property since the Siphon Filter series. The gameplay and visual scenery was heavily inspired by World War Z, The Walking Dead, and Sons of Anarchy, and the story was inspired by The Road, The Passage, and I Am Legend, which all mixes up into an average Harley-Davidson biker driving around the post-apocalyptic Oregon that of course includes the evil government. Days Gone would first be shown on E3 in 2018, and after many delays, which is never a good sign, Days Gone would finally see the light of day as a PlayStation exclusive on April 26, 2019, and quickly return into darkness. Most of the critics would give Days Gone anywhere between 6 and 7 out of 10, and some even giving it a 5 out of 10, with most of the remarks being bland story or awful graphical performance, which still could be seen to this day even on PC. And I know what you're already thinking, but the sales were pretty good. And they were. To some degree. Days Gone would sell 114,000 physical copies in Japan and flood the UK's best-selling game charts. And later on, Jeff Ross would make a tweet saying that the game sold 8 million copies, which was quickly debunked, revealing that it was actually 7.32 million, and if you look at the player infographics released by Bend Studio, it would appear to be even lower, but I guess some people spent $60 just to have a copy in their library. The tweet was deleted, by the way. In the same post, Jeff said that Days Gone was highly discredited, replying to Ghost of Tsushima getting praised for reaching 8 million sold copies. A game about samurais that not only got 8.5 across all critics, but also received a perfect 40 out of 40 score from a Japanese company that only gave perfect scores to 26 video games in its 38 years of existence. If that's not a flex, I don't know what is. Since Days Gone is a video game, let's start with breaking down gameplay, and of course, I cannot not mention the open world. I have enjoyed every second driving around the tight forest paths and broken roads that fill up the post-apocalyptic Oregon, and the choice of bike being the main vehicle not only adds some uniqueness to Days Gone, but also makes a bit of sense. I did hear some game reviewers say that bikes during a pandemic, that doesn't make any sense, everybody uses cars. Well, from technical and logical point, bikes are actually pretty useful during a zombie apocalypse. Bikes are much more fuel efficient than cars, small enough that you can drive around the forest full of tight spaces, and repairing it doesn't require 5 to 10 years of mechanic experience. Yeah, at the beginning it's absolute shit, but that's only because Deacon lost his, since he is a dumbass who hides a fully functional bike in the middle of the road. The open form factor of a bike also brings its dangers. Trapwires, for example, is one of them, which can completely fuck up your bike if you're not careful enough. Since no one takes care of the roads in a zombie apocalypse, not like they do now, fallen trees, sunken bridges, or trucks blocking the way are pretty common, and it encourages you to go off-road and explore the environment around you. Another thing that Bend Studio did pretty well in my opinion are the freaks. Freaks are the second biggest feature in Days Gone, and encounter with them is truly a thrilling experience. Stumbling upon a horde is the most terrifying feeling, especially during the night. You start getting goosebumps on your skin from the horde of 50 or sometimes hundreds of them feasting on whatever trash or flesh they managed to find in the wild. And the best part, they managed to do that without causing a meltdown in your apartment. And that is actually the craziest part. You can have 900 freaks on the screen all at the same time, and the frames would barely drop. The name that reeks the 2010s was chosen for a reason, to make them stand out from your average, common, pathetic zombie. Ew. As Emmanuel Roth, the VFX artist for the game, said, "The undead, they bite you. You get infected. It's nothing like for us. We chose for it to be the pandemic." It's like if people with ADHD called themselves neurodivergent to feel more divergent. The choice of animation and behavior was also not just copied from I Am Legend, but it was actually inspired by a guy who was doing a YouTube video where he was moving weird. I assume this one, and newts or smaller freaks were inspired by contortionists. So just imagine that video but performed by an actual human being. Now you might think that as a main selling point of the game, the hordes are going to be available to you right at the beginning of the game. Well, think again. As a mission, the hordes will unlock only at the very end of the game, with the two biggest being part of the story finale. You might stumble upon one before that, but it won't count as a camp XP, so you're doing it just out of pure boredom. You probably already guessed why that is, but it's honestly a dirty move to leave the best feature of your game for post-endgame. Dare I mention how long it takes to prepare for one? Here's the thing, usually you want to have some grenades and molotovs just for backup, which means you have to craft them. For that you need materials which you can't just buy from a local merchant, which means you have to go and find them. And holy shit, it's a pain in the ass. Napalm Molotov, for example, requires like 5 different ingredients which would never be found in the same spot. This means that you will have to visit like 3 to 5 different locations to find the stupid well, polystyrene actually, but you get the point. To summarize, you'll spend around 20 to 30 minutes collecting trash around Oregon for a 10-minute horde encounter. Of course, grenades are not mandatory if you have enough bullets for everybody. Speaking of guns, what about the combat? Well, it's alright, for the most part. I heard some fellow YouTubers complain about the aim being very difficult, but as a person who played old Stalker games, if you know you know, I found gun combat to be pretty entertaining. Yeah, it's often difficult, but that's the beauty of it. You're surviving in a post-apocalyptic world against people with pretty much the same odds and shooting skills. Bullets will hurt a lot, but that's what happens. It's also pretty funny that some of the guns are base boosted, especially sniper rifles. Really makes me feel like I'm shooting a poor drifter with a subwoofer. But out of like whatever number of guns you see here, the best one in Days Gone has to be a crossbow. Yeah, believe it or not, out of all the grenades, suppressed snipers, suppressed pistols, and suppressed rifles, the best weapon happens to be a simple crossbow. Don't believe me? 1. Easily craftable ammo with enough materials to craft 20 more. 2. Quiet and will never reveal your location even if you miss. 3. Kills everything in one headshot from any distance. 4. It can help you avoid taxes. And the only downside is you have one shot, after which you need like 4 seconds to reload it. It's a perfect weapon to take down an entire bandit camp or even fight off a pack of wolves. But hey Nate, you might ask, what about the in-game fillers? Side missions wise, you have a pretty generic set of side quests for a survival open world game. Take down bounties, clear out camps with bandits, and burn down freak nests. Bounty missions and camp clearings are pretty entertaining, with each location having unique terrain that you have to find a way to bypass and get inside. Freak nests also require you to plan your way around, as after burning one, it will poop out a couple of freaks which will start looking for you. What I really liked about the side missions is the small immersive sim factor. You can do them in any way or form you like, either in stealth or full-blown rampage, or maybe not participate at all and lure a horde of freaks into the ambush camp. Same with nests. If you run out of molotovs, you can throw a gas tank into the nest and explode it and it will burn it down. And of course, you have camps. In total, you're going to be visiting 5 camps in the game, with the first 3 ones being the main ones. Each camp will have its territory, weapon selection, bike parts, and supplies. The credits, or in-game world currency, are received after completing a mission and will go to whichever territory you are completing side and main mission on, as well as XP. This way you can prioritize one camp over another. For example, Hot Springs has a good selection of weapons but lacks any sort of bike upgrades, while Copeland's camp has good bike parts but barely any weapons. Some missions though are just plain stupid. One that comes to mind is the deer hunting mission, where Copeland teaches you how to track and hunt a deer, which essentially consists of tracking the deer using freshly generated feces and shooting it in the head. Why? Well, because in the next story mission, you're asked to get some animal meat, so now you have a reason to go and use the brand new skill. Trying to save me on another 10-minute side quest, huh? I see how it is. Also, what's up with the cutaways? There's a black cutaway for everything, starting a cutscene, ending a cutscene, hiding behind a rock, demonstrating a perfect capabilities of flying vehicle, landing on the ground, carrying a bunch of soldiers with guns wearing hazmat suits. Okay, the last one was a little bit of an exaggeration. Until you remember that there is a cutaway for refueling. No joke, there is a cutaway of Deacon refueling his bike, which is apparently not a cutscene because out of nowhere I get kicked off the bike while refueling. No cutaway, no nothing. Huh? You know, thinking of it now, I played Dying Light games recently where there would be a dedicated cutscene for opening a door, so I can't really bully Ben's studio for it. But still, why? If you're making a story game, then you could just make a 3-minute cutscene. It's totally fine.
And if you don't know how to make a proper cutscene, you could have asked Hideo Kojima.
For example here, Deacon could have snuck to the scientist, eavesdropped on the conversation, and right about here, Boozer would call him, attracting the attention of the guards and starting a stealth sequence. That way the player could focus on the story elements and not be preoccupied by staying a millimeter too far from the scientist. But no, let's make it more tedious instead and build 12 more tedious missions with the same objective.
I think I'm forgetting something. Oh, right.
What the fuck is this bullshit? So the game has bugs, still, a lot. The most popular one is enemies having a brief ragdoll seizure right after dying. I don't know why. Then we got poorly rendered textures, bears testing out gravity. At some point my y-axis got stuck and I could only move my camera left and right, which scared the shit out of me since I haven't saved the progress in a while. Deacon is turning black.
Think that, oh, here. Try this.
What? Where did he get that cap from? PC version of Days Gone came out post-Cyberpunk. Haven't we learned a single thing? At some point I decided to unlock a safe house, which is called Nero Station, where you first need to restart the generator to open the facility. Now, guess what was missing? Maybe the gasoline canister for the generator or the fuse box. The generator was missing! I spent 3 minutes looking for it, and that shit wasn't even there. Well, you know what? Maybe the story's pretty good.
Oh boy. Well, at least he's not hanging. The story is the main reason I'm making this video, and also the main reason to why the scores are so low.
Despite pretty good gameplay at some points, the story in Days Gone sucks. The game is full of incomplete plots, useless information, and a lack of proper storyline structure.
Govno in short, but let me quickly summarize the prologue so we can keep going with the story.
The game starts with a 3-minute prologue cutscene where Deacon, his wife Sarah, and his bro Boozer are trying to escape the hordes of freaks. Eventually, they reach the roof where they're met by the National Emergency Response Organization helicopter, or NERO in short. Lieutenant O'Brien says that the huge-ass helicopter only has one spot available, but Deacon uses his amazing bargaining skills to get one more spot. This is where Deacon needs to make a choice, either go with his wife Sarah or stay with Boozer. But bros before hoes, so Deacon decides to stay with Boozer and send Sarah with the NERO team. We get a splash screen that says 2 years later, and we see Deacon and Boozer are now drifting around post-apocalyptic Oregon, surviving by completing various runs and bounties for the nearby camps. Soon after, in their conversation, we find out that Sarah supposedly died when one of the NERO camps got overrun by freaks. But that's not confirmed since the body was not found, so Deacon will be constantly on edge throughout the game. From here, the game starts to split into two main plot points, which are learning more about the NERO and the virus, and Deacon is trying to figure out what happened to Sarah. Then there's also a smaller plot line with the Rippers, which interconnects with the story of some random ass girl named Lisa, which then slowly but surely blends into the backstory of Deacon and Boozer, and that somehow poops out as the story ending.
If you didn't understand a single thing that I just said, it's totally fine. Neither did I. But in the end, it all makes sense. Not Kojima level ending where after finishing the game you're like, I want to replay the game again. More like, okay, it makes sense.
If you play the game without asking why, how, and where did my $50 went, then the plot sounds pretty good. It's a story about a biker who spent 2 years of his life trying to find his beloved wife, hoping she's still alive. Since Sarah's like Schrodinger's cat, it's very difficult for Deacon to move on, as he never found the body and thinks that she still might be alive. And that's why Boozer starts planning on going north, far away from here, so Deacon can have an easier time moving on. Since this is also a zombie game, there's a plot around the story behind Nero and the virus. And there's a lot of pretty interesting information about the virus. It really felt like writers spent their sweet time exploring and developing the lore behind it to the fullest. But I'll be honest, the farther you go into the game, the more you start to notice that zombies are there just to put a zombies tag on Steam. Good example would be at the very end of the game, where they introduced a new type of freak just to never really do anything with it. Another cool thing about the story is Deacon will remember some of the NPCs from before the outbreak, like this gun vendor used to have an armory website and his own television show, and some would even remember Deacon and the club he was in. But either way, let's start with the first act of the story. Out of the two camps, Copeland's camp seems to be much better and more reasonable. It is run by a guy named Mark Copeland, who is a strong American patriot, but is still very reasonable when it comes to survivors and newcomers. He's relatively kind and accepts anyone who is willing to work. He also has his own radio station where he shares his true American beliefs, mostly complaining on how shitty the American government is and that the outbreak is some sort of conspiracy. But we skip this camp pretty much instantly and get to the worst camp in the game, Hot Springs. This camp is an absolute shithole. It contributes nothing to the story, and as a camp it's a complete waste of time. Tucker is the leader of the camp, and to say that she's the worst person ever would be an understatement. She runs her camp as a prison because everybody's an asshole, that's like literally what her explanation is, and everybody inside and outside hates it, with some even considering Hot Springs as a slave camp. At some point we have to track down a girl for Tucker who explains that she deliberately escaped the camp because Tucker would starve people if they didn't work on the farm, which is a huge land filled with rocks and gravel 20 feet under. If not a horribly made cutscene, I would have shed a tear. Instead, I shed a tear from laughing so hard. Sometimes while you're in the camp, you can see that the guards would beat up men and women for not doing their job or begging for food. It's also garbage as a gameplay element, as the only thing the camp sells are guns, which, trust me, as much as the game tries to promote them, ain't that good. Both Copeland's camp and Hot Springs feel like it's just a drive-by to Act 2, which is Lost Lake.
And that's another point. Why do those camps even exist?
Wouldn't it be better to spend your time developing one camp and writing better characters? What's the point of having one good camp that serves as a tutorial and a shitty camp that you're forced to stay in for longer? The only excuse for Hot Springs' existence is Lisa, who is a side character Deacon has a plotline with.
Next thing that definitely required more attention in a biker video game is the Biker Club.
Mongrel is a club that both Deacon and Boozer are or were part of. Deacon would join the club while drifting around Oregon in search for a place to settle, and Boozer, I only assume, was the OG member. Piece by piece we would find out that the Rippers, a local cult that follows the way of the freaks, are looking for them from all the hints that we get throughout the story. At the beginning of the game, Boozer got caught by a group of Rippers who torched his hand. But Rippers weren't just burning Boozer's hand for fun, they were specifically burning the tattoos off of his hand, the club tattoos. And apparently some of the camp survivors that were captured by the Rippers would always mention that Rippers would talk about some members of some Mongrel club, which is obviously Deacon and Boozer. And mid-game, when Deacon gets captured by the Rippers, that's where we find out that the leader happens to be the ex-member of the Mongrel club, Jesse.
Now, you see how you didn't really have a lot of emotions to that information because I never really mentioned Jesse before? Well,
neither did the game! Jesse's introduction as a villain of the story is another thing that I'm still trying to process, because there was no build-up to his reveal. He was never mentioned in any dialogue or notes. And we never seen Jesse before, neither in any of the flashbacks or cutscenes. However, there was one member of the Mongrel Club that was mentioned by both Deacon and Boozer, and that is Jack, the leader of the Mongrels.
And the game was sort of leading you to this grand reveal, because think about this.
The leader of the Rippers is the only person besides Deacon and Boozer who knows about the club, since he specifically requested to find Mongrels, which means that the leader was either part of the club or somehow was connected to it. Both Deacon and Boozer constantly mention Jack, who is a member of the club but think he died during the outbreak. This could have led to a grand reveal where the Ripper cult is run by Jack and he's still alive and seeks revenge on the guys for some reason that could have been explained by the genius writers of Ben's studio.
But Jesse, who the fuck is Jesse? The only thing we know about Jesse is he got kicked out of the club for... We don't even know, the game didn't mention that.
Only after reading the Wikipedia page I found out that it was because he killed a mongrel in a drug-fueled rage.
I'm learning important plot points in a video game from a Wikipedia page. How low have we stood?
I know I'm nitpicking at this point, but I just want to know who was in charge of writing the dialogues. Look, I know Deacon is not the most talkative person, but what the fucking dialogue is this?
Hey, Boozer. How's it going?
I got work to do.
Alright, don't work too hard.
Look, I get it. Hey Nate, they are brothers, that's how me and my homie talk to each other. Well, I have bad news for you, bro. If this is how you talk to your homie, he's leaving the server in a couple of days. Or this here.
No!
Lisa.
That's mine! This one's for gymnastics. I should have won first place, but...
Dude, who the fuck has such a conversation? Like, who talks like that?
What is this all about? I can't figure it out at all.
Here's a lockpick.
And I don't want to hear it by people saying, well, she was by herself surviving in the house all this time. It's been 2 years. She's been surviving by herself for 2 years. Around 3 freak nests, by the way.
Now to the main problem, Deacon.
Eventually, Deacon finds out that O'Brien is alive and asks him about Sarah. O'Brien says that they got separated during the Horde attack but promised to dig around the archives in return for Deacon's help eavesdropping on Nero researchers and gathering information. After we finish all the Nero work, O'Brien tells Deacon that Sarah was transported from the original evacuation camp that got overrun to a new one, but that one was overrun as well, with only Nero personnel and people with high-level clearance leaving alive. And unfortunately, Sarah was not one of them. This is the climax of the story, where the hope for Sarah's survival completely fades and Deacon starts to rethink his entire life. The last time we saw Deacon like this is when Boozer was getting worse due to his blood poisoning from the burnt hand, and Deacon was completely powerless over the situation. And that was a pretty emotional moment. I mean, you could see that Deacon is completely broken here. For the first time in the game, something went against Deacon's desires, and the plot armor that he wore all this time started to show cracks.
And the thing is, this moment doesn't really carry any weight because Boozer survives. He lives and he creates another fucking plot point.
Anyways, this moment started the best part of the game, character development, where Deacon actually starts to change. He admits that Boozer needs help and brings him a puppy as a present after noticing Boozer caring so much about the injured dog they found. Surely, a much better present than bringing him his bike back. He helps Lost Lake fix electric lines, something that he would have never done on his own, burns down the church he married Sarah in, and even gives Schizo a second chance to prove himself useful, which yes, did kind of backfire, but still.
And you can see that Deacon is becoming more cooperative, more understanding, what a true leader is supposed to be like and what director told us he's going to become at the end of the game. And then the writer is like,
guys, the game is too short. Here's 10 more hours. And here we go. Deacon shits out an aneurysm in form of a flashback where he remembers that Sarah had a government level clearance at her job, and Deacon remembers that O'Brien mentioned personnel with government level clearance were prioritized during the evacuation. So O'Brien digs more info and finds out that Sarah indeed was transferred to some militia camp in Crater Lake. Then Deacon completely throws away my 15 hours of time gaining respect in Lost Lake and makes a deal with Iron Mike to show him the secret path to Crater Lake in return to never come back to Lost Lake, which he does anyways at the very end. So basically anything past this point is a waste of time.
To be fair, we can't really blame John Garvin. He is just the director of the game. He didn't write the story. We have to blame the writer.
Damn. I guess I can blame the director. The reason I talked about Deacon's potential change as a character is because there are 3 distinctive moments or hints in the game that should have led to that outcome. The first one is with Iron Mike, where he takes Deacon to the place where his original group killed each other over resources. This is where Mike reminds Deacon that solving problems with violence is never an option and that giving a chance to others is important. Next one happens with Ricky. During one of their missions on restoring the power generator, Ricky explains that the reason she stopped drifting with them is because she always wanted to settle down, and after seeing Deacon's picture of Sarah and his constant mumbling in his sleep, she realized that if she keeps drifting with them, she will never move on from her past of losing her family. And the last is straightforward, that happens when we get captured by Jesse. Right after he leaves, we're met by Lisa, who decides to join the Rippers after finding out their reason for praising freaks, which is,
It's because they don't remember what they've lost. Who they've lost.
freaks can't remember the past, they just walk forward, living in the present. And that is a clear as day hint that Deacon should have moved on and become the leader that Wikipedia promised me he will become.
Unfortunately, somebody found the 10 hours of script that somebody tried to shred, taped it back together, and now we get the shittiest 5 hours of my time.
The last part of the game is happening in the Crater Lake, to be more specific, inside the militia camp.
And I'll be completely honest, if you want to still have good memories of Days Gone, either close the game right here or download a save file where somebody already finished the game, went through hell, and now is suffering somewhere in his agony. Let's begin with the obvious. Sarah.
After finally getting accepted in the ranks of the militia, we find Sarah in one of the tents, working as a scientist. Deacon offers her to escape the camp, but Sarah refuses, saying that she wants to complete her experiment before leaving. Before that, we also meet another scientist, Lieutenant Weaver, who is a chemist working on explosives. Both are working on the freaker problem. Sarah, as we later find out, is working on a cure from the virus, while Weaver is working on a simpler solution. Whoever gives the results first gets to keep working, while the other will be put in a cave. Since the budget of the game is 200 million? More like a six-pack and a couple of meat sticks. We don't get to choose, so we supply both equally. And since making a cure is much harder than a bottle of explosives, Sarah fails miserably and gets demoted.
During those missions, we will take Sarah with us to help us with collecting materials, and one of those places happens to be Sarah's old workplace, Cloverdale Research.
The mission was to find a centrifuge machine, which is inside of a research lab that not only prospers in food, but also has some of the workers still alive inside. And after killing the last one, we find out the truth behind the freaker virus. It was created by Sarah, and of course, the government was planning to use it as a weapon.
Wow, if only there was a guy who could have known, who could have figured everything out by himself.
Well, actually, somebody did. Turns out the plan was uncovered by an intern named David, who mentioned it to Sarah, but she didn't believe him. This forced David to steal the virus and fly to Portland during the environmental expo to confront Cloverdale Research, where he accidentally breaks the vial and infects everyone in the event. We cry about it, pretty depressing, pretty sad. After which Sarah and Deacon had to wait out a snowstorm in one of the cabins, where I at least hoped to get a small conversation where they could talk about their life during the 2 years of not seeing each other. This woman had a ruptured kidney, flew on the helicopter for hell knows how long, survived multiple camp attacks by the freaks, climbed all the way to lieutenant rank in the militia camp, and all we hear is,
Yeah, well, a lot's changed since then.
A lot has changed. What the fuck you mean a lot has changed? You sound like you went through World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and you can't summarize your whole experience in 2 paragraphs. A lot has changed.
what happened?
Out of 10 NPCs that are wasting polygons in the video game, there's only one character that is actually pretty interesting, and that is Iron Mike.
Iron Mike is the leader of Lost Lake Camp and is one tough motherfucker. Right away we can see that Mike is a very reasonable and wise person. He's trying to rebuild the community without violence, even if it means working with scumbags like Schizo or even the Rippers, creating a peace treaty with them and promising that he will never be the first one to break it. And there's a very big reason for it. As I already mentioned before, during one of the runs with Mike, he brings Deacon to a place full of dead bodies and explains that right after the outbreak, the town decided to share resources and fight freaks together as a group. But eventually resources started to run short, which divided the mass and led to a huge massacre, with Iron Mike being the only survivor. This traumatized him, and after the incident he promised himself to always value human life, no matter how dirty the hands are. After the Rippers kidnapped Deacon, they would attack Lost Lake, but Iron Mike would stop the fight, reminding Carlos that his side of the peace treaty is still standing, resolving the situation once again without violence. He even let Schizo free, even though the attack and the lives of many innocent survivors were his fault. Unfortunately, during the attack on the militia, Iron Mike would receive a serious wound, which led to his death.
Iron Mike is an example of a great leader, something that Deacon should be aiming for in the game, because he's the only hope for rebuilding society and putting everybody back together. All Deacon does is extends the story with his dumbass decisions. Like, dude, just piss off, man. Be cooperative. Be gay.
Colonel Garrett also sparked my curiosity. Matthew Garrett is the leader of the Shoots militia and is a religious man who follows the word of God, has his own cracked religious man cave, and a pretty solid idea for rebuilding society, finding books and teaching people agriculture, architecture, and science. The problem is he takes his religious a bit too far, almost living by the verses of the Bible, and that's why even some of his lieutenants think he's batshit insane.
Here's where we finally get to the last moments of the game, and I swear to God, it really felt like half the studio left the studio and grab the hard drive with the patches!
At some point I had to kill a sniper before he shoots me or the barrels to proceed forward. Logically, I destroyed the first 2 barrels in front of me and waited until the sniper peeked so I could shoot him. But the sniper thought otherwise and shot the last barrel through his own cover. Oh, we got Mr. Luke Cage over here, taking 39mm rounds like they're Skittles. He took 2 more from the M4 and still alive? And look at this bullshit. I see the cutscene of Schizo threatening Weaver, cutscene ends, 3 seconds later, Weaver's dead. Dude, climbing under a log takes longer than this.
Well, Jeff, if you really cared about the game, surely the final antagonist boss fight in your out of this world, open world amazing game is probably something that should be remembered by many.
Oh yeah, right, there is no final boss fight, he just dies from drinking tea. In their defense, the tea was poisoned by Sarah using hemlock, but still! No, seriously, how can people say this game is amazing? Have you heard of Steam or PlayStation Store in this case? You know that there's like thousands of more games that you can play that are definitely better and cheaper than this shit. After the credit scene, I spawned back to the militia camp and...
What the fuck?
Okay, what the fuck's he
See
working
you around.
Where they just... What the fuck is this? Why everything just disappeared? Well, time to uninstall.
I think we all have to agree with Jeff Ross that Days Gone should have gotten as much recognition, if not more, than Ghost of Tsushima, because only he could come up with such a genius and outstanding ending for an open world video game. Miyazaki is shaking in his chair right now from such an outstanding boss fight design. Even he, in 12 years, could not come up with the amazing idea of killing off the final boss of the 50-hour-long game with a fucking tea. Fucking ODs on a tea. Not even God is helping here right now.
So, is Days Gone really that bad? Well, it's a very debatable question, but I guess after this video you will agree that Days Gone is just mid. If you want to play the game for the gameplay, then sure, have at it. Despite the shitty story, gameplay is very good for a AAA open world game, and if you look past the mess that is called plot progression, then you actually might enjoy the game. The very obvious flaw is that Ben Studio tried to put so many different plot lines into one game, but never really finished any of them, so you get this unenjoyable mess that is not only very hard to follow, but also impossible to dive into due to poor progression. And yeah, I kept seeing shorts saying that, oh, everything would have been explained in the sequels, Days Gone was supposed to be a trilogy, John Garvin has so much cool ideas for the next game. Guys, you have to sell the first game before even considering more content. I don't know why Ben Studio didn't follow the well-known zombie survival script, where the first game focuses on the zombies or monsters, then the second game talks about the human conflict, partially including monsters, and then the third one would completely be one human ideology versus another human ideology existing in a world full of mutated creatures. To be unique, you don't have to rewrite an already existing structure, especially in a video game. You just have to add fresh game mechanics, new conflicts, and new problems that the main character has to deal with, and just keep at it. But Days Gone has everything and nothing all at once. The story has unfinished plot points that I didn't mention, one of the most popular ones being why did Deacon and Iron Mike forget about their cave sealing plan. Earlier in the story, Deacon offers Iron Mike to use TNT and seal off the cave, since according to Nero's research, hundreds of freaks use them to hibernate during the day. That would reduce the freak population, making the forest and roads a bit safer. Yes, the TNT they found was used to destroy the dam, but it's not like this was the only TNT in the entire Oregon. Or this part of the cutscene where Ricky flirts with Deacon and we get a shot of Schizo peeping through the window. I shit you not, this leads nowhere. The only correlation I can see is Ricky mentioning that Schizo already did something similar to her and Abby. But okay, so what? Dude's a pervert, that's like not interesting. And the cutscene itself with Ricky and Deacon was pretty fucking awkward. There might be a theory that PlayStation forced them to cut out some parts to make the game shorter or add some to make it longer, but neither the creators mentioned anything of sort, and trust me, they really like to talk. As a final attempt to, I don't know, restore the game, Ben Studio released a remastered version of Days Gone on PC and PlayStation, as well as a DLC with new survival modes and other features. Even though I don't really see the point of remastered because Days Gone is already a pretty beautiful game, I do have to say thanks to Ben Studio, because that 32GB update at least brought the 10s back.